Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our first ever Trinity Science Club STEM presentation meeting. We're going to be doing a little bit of a guest speaker talk and then transition into a Q&A portion. But beforehand, I just want to introduce the Trinity Science Club because not only is this our very first meeting, but this is the first year that Trinity is having a science club. And we are so excited just to be here and doing this for you and those of you who are here right now and those of you who may hopefully be watching after the fact. We are here for your benefit and career exploration. In fact, there are two reasons that the Science Club came about. The first of them, that there are just a lot of students at Trinity who have a passion for science, and we thought that it would be wonderful for us to have some sort of organization within our school for these students to come together and share and cultivate that passion. But secondly, and arguably most importantly, we are here for your career education. A lot of us, I know me as someone who wants to go into science in the future, are just daily inspired by our love of science and the desire to continue with this field as we go forward every day. You know, when I wake up, everything I do is with that in mind in the future. And if we can impart that same inspiration and motivation to even one more student, then we will have achieved our goals with Science Club. And presentations like this, of course, are not going to be the only things we're doing. Next year, we will be hopefully affecting a lot of positive change in our community centered around science, getting a lot of projects going, just really taking off with the club. But again, presentations like this one that we're doing tonight are really at the center of our mission here. And we are just so excited to be able to bring this to you, hoping so much that people will be able to benefit a little bit. So if you are watching this later on and you think you are interested in the Science Club and its mission, its goals, and you would love to just maybe learn a little bit more, join in, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I think you can easily find my email just by typing in Erin in the email bar. I think Trinity's server has everything all interconnected, or go back to Mr. Gadecki's email, which he kindly sent out for us a few days ago. That should have my contact information in it as well. Please reach out. We would love to get as many people involved as we can. But with that out of the way, we are joined tonight by our very own Dr. Evans, who is a Trinity parent as well as a healthcare professional in New Hampshire who specializes in internal medicine. And as we know, a lot of Trinity students often go on to enter the medical profession themselves. So this is a really fantastic opportunity just to hear from someone in that position who's currently doing what you yourself might be doing one day. So Dr. Evans, we are so thrilled to have you with us tonight as our very first guest speaker. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your story with us. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. So for those that don't know me, I'm Dr. Marisol Evans. I'm Daniel's mom. I've been an internist for about 25 years. I graduated medical school in 1993, and I did my residency at Danbury Hospital in Connecticut. So my journey is a little bit different than what most of you are going to embark on, because I was born and raised in the Dominican Republic. So my journey did not go through the US college system. It's a completely different type of college experience. In my high school, we didn't have CP honors, AP classes. Everybody just had hard classes, and everybody took the same classes. Everybody took science every year. Everybody took social studies every year. So it was different than how it's structured here in the US, where you have different levels, and some people may not take a fourth year of science or things like that. So when we apply to the universities, there's a number of universities in the country, and you apply, you take an entrance exam, and that's kind of basically it. I opted to do an intensive undergrad program. So I finished my undergrad in 2 years. I went to school year round. So there were no summer vacations. We just went year round for 2 years, and I finished all my undergrad in 2 years. That was what my core group did at my college. So then I did medical school for 4.5 years. And in order to get a license to practice medicine in the Dominican Republic, you have to go for a year and work in an underserved area of the Dominican Republic. So I would take public transport, go to this clinic about an hour away, work there until 1 o'clock. I would come home, I would eat lunch, and then a friend would pick me up. We would go to another friend's house and we would study for USMLEs. So for people that go into medicine, you have to take your USMLEs, are a series of exams. One you do after basics in medical school, one after clinicals, and then there's others that are done additionally. In the Dominican Republic, because we're not training necessarily to go to do residency in the US, we had to go back and study all our basics after we were done with medical school. So we had to go back while we were doing our underserved area and study embryology, histology, biochem, all of the basic sciences as if we were just starting medical school. It was not easy. So I was working, and then we would go and study until 1 o'clock in the morning. And then I was up at 6 o'clock to go to work. And we did that for about a year to get through the basics and then the clinicals. So when I was in med school, there was an agreement with Danbury Hospital that my college had, and 2 students from every internal medicine rotation could go and do their internship to do that rotation at Danbury Hospital. So I was chosen with another friend, and both of us ended up going and doing residency at Danbury Hospital down the road. We didn't even have to do the match program, which is a big relief for us. They just gave us a contract because they knew us. And so I graduated from Danbury Hospital. Because I was a foreign medical student, I had to do a J1 waiver, which means if you graduate from a foreign medical school and you come here and do residency, you either have to go home for a couple of years and work there, and then you're allowed to come back and work, or you have to go do your first job in an underserved area. So I met my husband, we got married, and we moved to Alabama for 4 years. And that's where I did my underserved area, where my J1 waiver. So from then I got my green card, I got my citizenship, and then I just stayed. We moved to New Hampshire, and we've been here for about 20 years now. So it's a different kind of system that what most of you are going to do, because the college system is different and the setup is kind of different. I always think about, how different the cost is, in particular for college, especially going into medical school. So one thing that I always tell people, and anybody that is going into the sciences that is probably going to need either medical school, graduate school, anything like that, is to go for the best program that is the most cost effective in your undergrad. Save all your money for medical school. Save all your money for grad school. The 10 last doctors that we've hired, we have no clue where they went to college because we don't care. Very rarely do we know where they went to medical school. What brings you in are your internships, your summer residencies, your summer programs that you do. If you get into a research program with a clinic, something like that, that's what's going to tip the balance when you go looking for opportunities in the medical field. So you want to get through undergrad, which is little debt as possible. Remember, Ivy League is wonderful. Ivy League does not give merit scholarships. So all the work that you guys do, your APs, your great scores, your great GPA, all the things that at other schools that are great schools will give you $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 worth of benefits, you're going to get zero in an Ivy League. Ivy League only gives financial aid. So, you got to weigh those things, because if I could do anything that I didn't know when I started my career, it would be the finance portion of it. It would be credit cards, school loans, retirement services, how to save money, those are the kinds of things that I would say are pretty important that most kids just don't know. I mean, I didn't know them at this age. So that's a big one for me. I think that the undergrad, you want to go with an excellent program that can give you as much money as you can possibly get. Military is a great option for those that are inclined. And the direct entry programs, there's a lot of them, and more are coming up. It's a big relief to be done with your undergrad and already know where you're going to medical school. So those are just off the top of my head things that I think are really important that most people don't know or aren't aware of. Um, Medicine has changed a lot. It's even since I started practicing. So you want to have as much hands-on as you can. EMT programs, things like that that give you that leg up when you're applying to different things. I would say is pretty significant. So, um, does anybody have any questions about what I've been talking about so far?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate it. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to get some insight. I'm curious to know kind of what a day in the life is for you as a doctor.
Okay, so a day in the life. My work has a lot of preventative aspects to it. So a lot of making sure people are getting their mammograms, their colonoscopies, their vaccines. We do a lot of diabetes care, blood pressure care, those kinds of things. So I start my job. I work from 8 to 5 on Mondays and from 7 to 3 the rest of the week. So I work full time, but I end my day at 3 o'clock most days of the week. However, I'm already on the computer by 5:30 in the morning doing work, and I'm on the computer at night watching TV, trying to finish up, notes and things like that. We do a lot more of that computerized note-taking thing than we ever did when I started my career in Alabama. We had paper charts, and you came in at 8 and I went home for lunch and I went home at 5 and everything was done. But now there's a lot of things that have to be documented, and lots of T's crossed and I's dotted, and so that's very, very time consuming. However, I still do love my job. I have patient families that I have their grandmother, their grandfather, the mom, the dad, the uncles, the aunts, the kids now are growing up and coming on board. So that's the really fun stuff that I always thought I wanted to do when I was thinking about being a doctor, which I wanted to be a doctor since I was 11. I didn't really deviate except for junior year because I had the most amazing chemistry teacher she's the best teacher I've ever had. That's it. But she was such an excellent chemistry teacher that for a while I almost went into chemistry, and then I said, no, I'm going back to medicine. But I certainly aced all my chemistries in college, everywhere, because of that teacher. So I knew very young, and that's a very helpful thing that most people don't know, and they shouldn't know necessarily at this point. But I was lucky enough that I kind of knew pretty young that that's what I wanted to do.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. If anyone else has a question they'd like to pose, they can go right ahead. I have some other ones ready to go if not, but I think we do have a few ready to go. If any of our science club members might want to chime in.
You talked a little bit about how the med school was different where you went than it is like in the US. What was the hardest part, in your opinion, about like the whole process?
I think that because I was really immersed and with a group of people that were completely immersed in what we were doing, it was just very time consuming. So our college, when I see some kids' colleges and their schedules and stuff, our schedule wasn't like that. We were in college at 7 o'clock in the morning, and most days we didn't go home until 6 or 7 after labs. That was pretty routine. And so the time factor, I think, was the hardest thing. And then you would get home and you had tons of work to do and notes to get through, and they had, all the usual things. But I think the time consuming part of it is probably the hardest thing. As far as subjects go, I would say that my pharmacology was super, super hard. The dean of the medical school was the one that taught that, as well as physiopathology. Those classes were the hardest classes ever. It was one of those classes where you just sat there and went, come on, just let's get through this. And the dean would actually look at the group of kids. We would all come up at the end of the class, and he would look over his glasses and go, you passed, you passed, you passed, you didn't pass, you didn't pass, you didn't pass, you passed. So you didn't know anything if you were passing or not until he gave you the okay, because everybody, it was a really big struggle. Those were the hardest classes.
Well, that sounds, wow, crazy difficult. But I think the fact that you were able to, get through that and here you are today, a successful medical professional, I think that should serve as an inspiration for anyone who's maybe a little bit fearful of classes like that in higher
Yeah, don't be
education.
fearful. Don't be fearful.
Mhm.
It all works out because you guys have gone through a high school that, because of the level of classes, of teachers, of assignments, of things that you do just in your normal life, um, they're kind of preparing you already for the kinds of things that are coming in college and even in med school. You guys know how to time manage, and if you don't, you'll figure it out by the end of next year. Time management is really key, and that's really where you balance it out. I will tell you, my mother would always joke around because she would say, all these other kids are locked in their houses and they don't do anything. How can you be going out every weekend? We studied very hard, but we also partied very nicely every weekend because you needed the outlet, you needed to see your friends, you needed to hang out. And they were the same people that you were studying with the other days. But then on Friday nights, forget it. Nobody was studying. It didn't matter what was coming on Monday, what project was happening. We were out, we were about, we were on the town. So balance.
Balance is definitely key. Anyone else have anything they would like to ask? This is a great opportunity. I do have a few things as well.
I got one question. You might have already touched upon this. My question would be, how do you keep up with modern technology? I mean, you went to school probably several years ago, but medical stuff
You're
changes
sweet,
every
Hunter.
year.
Many years ago, Hunter.
Yeah.
That's
Not to be a fact. No
thank
offense.
you. You're adorable. Thank you. So how do I keep up?
Yeah.
The clinic that I work for, Dartmouth Hitchcock. For those of you that don't know, it's really the biggest medical provider in New Hampshire. So when you don't work for yourself, there are some advantages and some disadvantages. But the advantages are that they have a lot of training. They have a lot of the newest things, the newest medical records. This is how we're gonna, keep track of patients now. They have people that work to say, hey, listen, she hasn't come in for a physical in the last 2 years. Let's call her. So that's how you're able to kind of keep track of it. They do a lot of training and you just kind of figure it out on the fly, really, but they do have a lot of training that they do.
I'm curious to know what you might say to a student who's at some point in their high school career and are considering a medical profession, but they aren't exactly sure if it's what they want, and they're kind of on the edge, and they're just trying to discern what they want to do going forward. What would be your number one piece of advice just for the, decision side? You did have some great advice about finances and everything, but for that specifically.
So for the decision side, you really just have to know if a life of service is something that you want. Because it's a life of service. It's a life of being on call. It's a life of missing some, now I've been in the career now for a lot of years, but during training and during my first years, you miss things. You miss birthdays, you miss gatherings, you miss a lot of things. The rewards are really, really significant. I feel that taking care of patients, like I said, having entire families that I've known for 20 years. I just spoke actually to my nurse in Alabama, who I had for my first 4 years in my medical practice. And she was talking to me and telling me, this person still asks about you. This other person still. So those are patients that I had 25 years ago, 24 years ago. Those connections are very meaningful. Getting somebody's blood pressure under control, getting somebody's blood sugar under control. Look, he was never compliant with anybody, and now all of a sudden he's doing everything that you're telling him to do because he clicked with you. And now all of a sudden look, I'm running a half marathon because you made me lose 40 pounds. Those are the things that are worth it, but it's a lot of sacrifice. There are fields in medicine that are not primary care or surgical fields that allow you to have a more a less intensive type of schedule. So that's always a possibility. But I would say, you know, medical school, the biggest thing for me, honestly, really, really honestly, is the financial piece. Just really try to go for the best quality at the lowest cost to you, because I have colleagues that are in their late 50s that are barely just finishing paying off their medical school debt. Especially if you go into a field like primary care, we're the lowest paid people. So if you go into cardiovascular surgery, you'll probably be done sooner. But for primary care, it takes a really long time. For me, it didn't take long because I went to medical school in my country. It was affordable. My parents paid as I went. I didn't have the opportunity to have a job because I told you guys that we were in school all day long, so nobody worked. We just went to school year round. But I had no debt when I came to do residency. That is a gift that people would just go, I can't believe you don't have any debt. That's incredible. So that's a big one. But the rewards are really, really significant. And I would still go into it. Consider the military, like I said before, that's a great way to do it. And consider when you finish, if you go into the medical field, consider doing a couple of years in an underserved area here in the US. My best friend from residency did nephrology, kidney specialty, and he paid off his entire student loans because he went to work in a really remote area of Montana for 4 years. So if you're flexible, there's ways of doing it that will give you what you want and will give you what you need without making you having, you know, without letting you have to pay in for years and years and years and years to come.
Definitely some very good advice. I know that that's like one of the number one concerns in some cases, just that student debt. But it's also really good to hear that just about how rewarding you found this profession, because of course, some, you know, in reality, careers are not always going to be a dream every single day, even if it's what you love. And it's just good to hear that through the difficult parts of it, at the end of the day, you would repeat it and you would do it all over again because there are those meaningful moments and connections that you make. So I love to just hear that from someone who's actually in the field. It looks like we've gotten a few new guests since we began. So if anyone has any new questions that come to mind.
I had just one question to play off the question you previously asked. So you mentioned before that you always knew what you wanted to be, like from a very, very young age, what profession you wanted to pursue, but what specifically pushed you towards medical?
So I wanted to be a baby doctor, which is not what I ended up doing. I love children. I always thought I was going to be a pediatrician. In fact, I have friends from high school that still think that I'm a pediatrician because that was what my path was. And then I did my pediatric rotation. And my pediatric rotation was in a very, very poor area of the Dominican Republic. It was very sad. We had to do a lot of procedures in undernourished children that were abandoned. It was just, I spent 4 months in a deep depression and I said, I don't think I can do this. And so I switched to adult care, which is, you know, it's not that they're not sad things and things like that, but it's not the same. So it was just, I just wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to take care of people. I wanted to live in a little country in a country area where like everybody knew your name, like you see on TV. That's what I wanted to be.
I think that's beautiful. I love when people carry out those dreams from a young age. And I think it's also really cool how they grow and develop. You know, of course, we don't necessarily know exactly what our life is going to look like when we're really young. So it's cool that you try that out. You saw what maybe did work for you, what didn't, and you were able to bring it into what you do today. So that's really cool to see. Anything else from anyone? I think we might have some other questions potentially, if you guys want to think about it. I also was wanting to ask you, so it sounds like you've really had some meaningful moments. You've talked about how entire families work with you and know you and people continue to ask about you, and that must just feel so good. But I was curious if there's any one particular moment that stands out in your mind as this one thing that just clicked and you're like, this is what I'm meant to be doing. I made the right choices. I'm glad to be here. It sounds like that's kind of your overall sentiment, but I love hearing just little individual anecdotes about that kind of thing.
So not that long ago, I had a patient who was in his late 20s, long history of drug addiction, had some hip issues related to his drug addiction. They needed to be replaced at a very young age because he kind of got infections and things like that, and they had to be replaced. And he tried to get his hip replaced probably for about 5 years. And he would try and he would relapse. And if if he was relapsed, he couldn't do the procedure, obviously. And so he kept trying and trying and trying. And when he finally got his hips replaced, that was a pretty big moment for myself and for my nurse, actually, because we just kept, come on. Okay, let's try this program. Okay, let's try this other program. What about this one? Do you need me to call your case manager? So the fact that he finally was able to get his hips done and walked into the clinic not that long ago, walking straight instead of in a wheelchair or with like little canes at the age of 32, that was a pretty meaningful moment for me.
Oh, that's beautiful. It must be just wonderful to have been sticking with something for so long and eventually affected such meaningful change in somebody's life, which will absolutely stick with them forever. So it must be great about that profession just to
It
be.
is, but now I don't want you guys to think that that's all we see and that it's all positive. It's a challenging profession too. There's a lot of, especially in the age of internet, Google Doc, and all this other stuff, there's a lot of difficulty with education now. A lot of people come in with ideas, whether it be vaccines or treatments, or they saw it on Dr. Oz, or they just simply won't make the changes that are necessary. So there's a lot of challenges too, that you just kind of have to bear with and put it aside and go, okay, going on to the next one, because there are situations where you just you can't reach people sometimes, and but you try your best and you just keep on trying and hope for the best.
Definitely a reality that people have to be willing to face going into any career, but especially this one. It sounds like you really have to take the good with the bad, but it seems like it's ultimately very worth it.
It is. For me, it's been very worth it.
Mm-hmm. If there aren't any other questions, anybody, this is definitely an awesome opportunity.
I have a question real quick.
Sure.
So I recently just learned about shadowing someone in the medical field, and I wanted to know if you have any ideas how I would get into that, because I was trying to find it somewhere here or in Boston, and the places were a lot farther.
Right. So we actually the daughter of a friend actually got her high school. You have to do a whole series of things through your high school, through Trinity. And there's paperwork that needs to be filled, and there's insurance stuff, and there's all sorts of things that need to happen. But if you decide to do something like through a medical clinic where they accept high schoolers to come in and shadow, there's a series of papers that can be done, but it can be done. We've had one or two that have come through Dartmouth Hitchcock, and they've been able to shadow even in high school. And this particular girl came in with me and would see patients, and you just ask patients for permission, and they would give their permission, and she wouldn't do anything. She would just observe, but it can be done. You just have to do the paperwork, and it can be a little bit time consuming.
That's a really
do you think, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry?
Go ahead.
Do you think there's a place where I could do that for shadowing a neurosurgeon? Because again, it's kind of hard here.
Yeah, so neurosurgery, I would say that Dartmouth Hitchcock in Lebanon is probably your best bet for that, if you're staying somewhere local. If you go outside, Boston obviously has a lot of different possibilities, but sometimes the crossover for high school, like a high school in New Hampshire, may not be able to do the paperwork that they would require to shadow someone in Massachusetts. So that would be your only difficulty. I would look into Dartmouth Hitchcock in Lebanon, because they have neurosurgeons and they're part of the New Hampshire system, so they might be able to work with you there.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That's a great thing to look into. Good luck. I think that shadowing, especially while you're in high school, before you decide on your major and everything and take a definitive path, that's a great opportunity. Anyone who is considering that should really look into it, because I think just getting experience beyond what you can, Google about the thing that you want to go into will help you figure out early on what you actually want to do, so you don't, go into something that you realize like, oh, maybe this isn't for me. So thank you so much for your advice about that. I think that anyone who's watching this who wants to go into a medical profession should really consider something like that. It sounds very impactful and something that would be very important for you going forward. All right. I would love any other questions or ideas from any of our other guests today. If not, and while we're saying this, you can type something in the chat if you have any remaining questions. But Dr. Evans, if you have any parting words that you would want to share with our Trinity students who may be considering a career in just science in general or the medical field, you've given us a lot of wonderful advice. You've shared some touching stories. It has been so wonderful speaking with you. Just any ideas you'd love to share with us?
Just remember that a lot of college admission processes and medical school processes, you want to be well-rounded. They don't necessarily just want to see the science. Show them who you are. If you like music, show that part of yourself to when you're doing your applications. If you love video games, show that part of yourself. They're really, I have several peers that sit on admission boards and things like that. They don't want the cookie cutter, straight A, only does this. They have no other interests out there. You want to show who you are. You like music, you like composing, you do stop animation. Those are the things that make people go, oh, that's an interesting thing. I wonder how she does that. So that's something that I would encourage all of you, is to be yourselves when you're applying, whether it's college or med school. Be who you are. If you like doing makeup for horror type things, do that. Show them that. Send them a sketchbook with those things. Those are things that, believe it or not, get you in the door more than just a regular, yeah, okay, they did a million APs and a million of this and a million of that. Be who you are. Now, if you are the person that really just loves science, that's what they love, that's okay too. But be who you are. Show the personality, show the difference. What makes you different than the 5 other people that are coming in with the same criteria as you? And that's something that I would just keep in mind.
Thank you so much. That's really wonderful advice. I think at the end of the day, we have to remember that we are all individuals, and that in and of itself is beautiful, and we have so much to share. So even if you're here wanting to go into a career in science, there's something that makes each of us unique. And I think that's some great advice, Dr. Evans, that I hadn't even really considered very deeply. Just, be yourself. All right. Well, it has been so wonderful having you with us tonight. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. I know you've told us you're a very busy person, but it has been so incredibly wonderful
It was fun. Thank you.
So I hope that people have taken a lot away from this. I certainly have. I think we've at least advised a few people, and hopefully we'll reach even more people when we put this recording up later. But if no one else has anything to say, I think we can say we're going to call that a night. And it has been absolutely wonderful to have you, Dr. Evans. Thank you.
Good luck to everybody.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Have a great evening, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.